Hey everybody, welcome back. We are here in Isla Grande Airport today in Puerto Rico. This is the secondary airport to San Juan, Puerto Rico. This is by Photo Rico Scenery. It's really beautiful little airport. And we're going to do a little bit of a different theme today. I want to talk about whether flight sim can save the world. First of all, let's get going here. We are in the WB Sim JP Logistics Cessna 152 here in Microsoft Flight Simulator 24. And let's get the door closed here. Get the fuel valve open. Go mixture rich. Carb heat is cold. Toes on the brakes. Rotating beacon on. Master and battery switches on. There is no fuel pump in this airplane. Go toes on the brakes, crack the throttle, take a look outside, make sure there's nobody outside to kill or maim, and we'll engage the starter. And there's a good start. Mags back to both. Let's check the oil pressure. Oil pressure is good. We'll bring the throttle back here a little bit. Turn the avionics on. And let's go. Guess there's no avionics master in this airplane. I just sort of realized that. And we'll squawk 7000, which is the VFR code down here. Transponder on standby. Nav and strobe lights coming on. We'll lean the mixture here a little bit for taxi. And I'm almost tempted to leave the yoke out of the way so I can see the instruments, but we'll just put that back for right now. All right, mixture's lean. Let's release the parking brake. We didn't prime the engine, did we? That's why we had a little bit of a parking brake wasn't on anyway. There you go. All right, so we'll go this way. So, like I said, a little bit of a different theme today. I had this idea rattling around in my head for a while now. And, you know, kind of a theme of different things that I'm thinking about kind of in my personal life. And, you know, what's going on in the world. And, you know, flight sim is such a big part of my life. Obviously, it's a big part of everybody's life as we get run down by a emergency response vehicle. Gotta be some irony involved there somewhere. And we'll come up here. You're serious. Microsoft, please. You're about to make me go against the theme of my video here. I'm actually going to keep the nose pointed in this direction for the run up, because you can see the windsock is pointed that way here. First things first, let's get in here and set our altimeter. Altimeter is 3004, which is pretty darn close to correct. So we'll go toes on the brakes. I want to set the parking brake here for the run up, and I will move the yoke for the run up. All right, we'll go mixture rich. We'll bring the throttle up now to 1800. All right, first things first. Let's check the mags. Good drop on the left mag, less than 150 RPM. We'll come back to both. Right mag, good drop within 50 RPM of one another. Now we will hit the carb heat here. Good drop on the carb heat. There is no fuel pump to turn off, so we're good to go. We'll just bring that back now to 1200. And then we'll do a throttle idle check. All you want is a nice smooth running engine. Throttle idle check sounds good to me. come back up here. I could have checked the could have checked the suction for the gyros, but I didn't do. Oh, suction for the gyros is right here. I didn't do that. And we'll just lean this again here. Release the parking brake. Don't need any flaps for takeoff. Go transponder squawk altitude. Yeah, don't need any flaps for takeoff. So we'll go mixture rich. Carb heat is cold. There is no fuel pump. Go landing light on to enter an active runway. And we'll head out of here. Winds are 080 at 100. Yeah, 100. 100 at 8 knots. So winds are pretty light this morning. Gorgeous scenery. This is just a beautiful little airport. I love the airport. And weather's great today too. Get out on centerline. That's why you check whether your heading indicator is set correctly, because mine certainly was not. I don't know why it was 180 degrees off, but heading indicator checks with the runway number. And we'll bring the power in. Takeoff power is set. Engine instruments are in the green. Airspeed's alive, 65 knots, and we'll rotate. And we'll get ourselves moving here. I wish I had my liveries for this aircraft for Flight Sim 24. There's some great 2020 liveries. There's a teal, like a metallic teal livery that I absolutely love for this plane. But it doesn't work in 2024, so be it. And I realize now that I have all players set. Well, it's actually somewhat appropriate for what I plan on talking about today. That we have all players set, and I've got the name tags on, so you may make an appearance in my video today. We'll climb it. I don't want to climb it any less than 80 knots, otherwise we won't be climbing. And there we go. Looking good there. How is that for a view? Isn't that neat? So we'll go over San Juan. We'll head out to Culebra. We'll see how far we get. I wanted to fly this airplane because I wanted something slower, give me a little bit more time, and I also wanted something with a high wing so we can get a nice view of the beautiful scenery here today as we're flying. So, you know, we are in a world today that is kind of, it seems a bit aggressive. It seems like there's a lot of conflict going on. And I'm talking small scale and big scale. You know, I mean, we have, you know, Ukraine, we have, you know, the Middle East. I mean, how many different, you know, conflicts do we have in the Middle East right now? Even places like, you know, other places in Central Europe and Southern Europe. And, you know, South America, Guyana and Venezuela, we have, it just seems like there's a lot of, you know, big conflict going on in the world. Southeast Asia, there's conflicts going on. The South China Sea and the, you know, the Pacific Rim. I mean, it just seems like sort of everywhere. And people just seem more tense, you know, to me anyway. You know, there was coming up here on San Juan Airport, San Juan International. There was an incident recently near where I live where, you know, somebody cut somebody off in a car and they came to a stoplight and the one guy got out with a knife and ran over towards the other car and the guy in the other car shot him. And you know, I was driving in my little podunk town here in central New York a couple weeks ago, and there's literally a 2 block, or actually it's like 1.5 blocks between kind of the main road into the city and a side street into where the grocery store is, and I was in front of somebody who was just apparently trying to get to the grocery store, and I didn't go fast enough apparently on that block and a half. Block and a half, you know. In central New York, we have a grand total of 2, 3, 4 stoplights in town. Tells you a little bit about how big my city is. Coming up on 3,000 feet. We'll level it off here. Pull the power back until we hear an appreciable drop in engine noise. And get nosing over here. And I apparently I didn't go fast enough on that 1.5 blocks, and so I received a one finger salute from the car behind me on that one. And you know, some anecdotal, you know, notes obviously, but you know, so we've got, you know, a lot of big conflict in the world, and it seems like we've got a lot of small conflict in the world too. And you know, I love small town America. I grew up in small town America. I've lived in big cities all over the world. I lived in, you know, in Hamburg, Germany, in Berlin, Germany. I've lived in, you know, Ireland. I've lived in New Orleans, in Manhattan, in, you know, Washington D.C. I've lived all over the, you know, all over the world, all over the country. But I love small town America, and you know, I love going to a local diner. You know, and we had a lady who was our waitress a week ago, in a small village here in central New York, and she's been working at the diner in town for 42 years. And not only that, we got talking to her, and it turns out that she doesn't like to live luxuriously. It was Mother's Day. It was coming. Mother's Day was going to be the next day, and she was talking about her son picking her up to take her for dinner that night. And she said, "I don't care where he takes me. It's not where we go. It's the fact that we're going to spend time together." And the conversation kind of morphed from there to, you know, that she had been. Everything she owned was secondhand, and even those things she was giving away to people, and she had at one point been kind of giving things away to 5 different families in the area to try and help other people. Now this is probably somebody who makes, you know, maybe makes $10 an hour, you know, all told. You know, we're talking small town upstate New York here, right? Working in the village diner, and I'm just rolling in trim and trying to see if we can manage to get level here. And that conversation really hit me because it's so often the people that have. I'm gonna start leaning the mixture here and watch the EGT come up as we lean the mixture, and then once that EGT peaks and starts going back the other way, we can just push the mixture in a little bit. Whoop. And this little line right here, this adjuster is there to set to mark where your peak EGT is. That way you know where it was. Got one. See there's the peak. See, it went back the other way. So now we'll just put it in a little bit until it drops about 2 notches on the dial here, and we're gonna wind up in a mountain in San Juan in Puerto Rico here if I'm not careful. All right, so that's good. And you know, so we have this incredible goodness in humanity, and at the same time we have like countries launching cruise missiles at hospitals, you know, and blowing up busloads of people. Just, I mean, there were people going home from church a couple Sundays ago got bombed. You know, it's like, and so I think with the amount of big conflict going on, and kind of I just feel like a tenseness in the world on a lot of personal level, but at the same time you see again just these incredible acts of kindness sometimes, and those are the things you kind of have to seek out because they don't tend to be promoted. They don't tend to be made, you know, made very much known, because bad news is the only news that sells. And I just wonder, like, I got thinking about it, and I mean, first of all, we can do better. You know, we can all do better. I can do better. But I got thinking about the medium that brings us all together, which is flight simulation. And I guess the first question I would ask is, like, is it bigger than we make of it? And can it be bigger than what we make of it? And the first question I'll answer with a yes. Flight simulation is bigger than what we make of it. Sheerly the idea, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I've done a lot of traveling in my life. And not only traveling, but I've also lived in other places, you know, in the world. I've lived in places where I theoretically shouldn't have been welcome. I've had the experience of living as an immigrant, which is not something a lot of people kind of from my, you know, background have experienced. I've also lived, like, you know, in the South as a northerner, you know, which, I mean, I don't know if I should, you know, make it too dramatic of a contrast, but there's certainly a history there. You know, there's certainly a history and you know, not necessarily always a good history. But I've always managed to get along with people. You know, I've always managed to get along with people, and I think that we spend way too much time thinking about what's different among us as opposed to what is the same among us. And if you get right down to it, you know, people essentially want the same things, right? I mean, you know, we all want, you know, the ability to grow, the, you know, ability to shape our own futures, to shape our lives, to try to improve things, not only for ourselves but for people around us. I don't have children, my wife does, and I don't think I will ever be able to understand the way that impacts somebody. But, you know, on a macro level, in this country, in the United States, there's so much talk about, you know, social factors, social, you know, influences on people's lives and people's abilities, people's opportunities. And one of the things that I've learned as I've grown older, a couple things. And I'm 49. I'll be 50 in December. And I kind of think like I was thinking about this the other day. I've always known that I would never have a midlife crisis, you know, because, you know, I'm very fortunate in that regard because I'm pretty happy, you know, but I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I've shaped my own life. I've had that luxury, and not everybody does. I mean, I wanted to live where I live. I live in a small town in central New York, and I wanted to live here. I'm happy to live here. Like I said, I've lived in big cities all over the world. I've lived, in a lot of, interesting places. And a lot of people would see where I live now, and it's like, well, there's not much there. There's not a lot of culture. It's not, why would it appeal to you? And it appeals to me for some of the reasons that I was talking about earlier. But what I find funny is, and I'll tell you a quick, kind of a contrasting story. When we were in Italy, my wife's oil pressure and fuels are all looking good. My wife's nephew got married in northern Italy in 2019, and I'd never been to Italy before. It wasn't that I wasn't interested in going to Italy. It's just there are so many places that I am interested in going to that Italy just wasn't, really on the map per se. And so we were in this small town in Italy, San Pietro in Cariano, I think it was called. And we got there on a Sunday, and on a Monday morning we went to the local cafe, and we're just sitting there having cappuccinos and pastries and just kind of hanging out. It was a really nice little cafe. And I remember it was about 9:30 in the morning, and there were a couple Italian businessmen standing at the counter with their, dressed to the nines. I mean, cufflinks and beautiful suits, cut, tailored, nice suits, at the counter on a Monday morning at 9:30, drinking their espressos and cappuccinos out of, ceramic saucers, like nice cups, right? Not a care in the world. They weren't worried about being late for work. They weren't worried about, pretty much anything that I could figure out. And you contrast that with life in small town New York, right? And I sit on my front porch and have coffee every morning. I'm pretty much in a block off Main Street, kind of in the center of town. And you see people racing down my street at 900 miles an hour like it's the Indy 500 to get to the gas station a block and a half away, 2 blocks away, to get their coffee in a paper cup and run out the door giving fingers to people on the way to work. And it's just like, what are we doing? If you can't be relaxed here, if you can't kind of have a bit of a laid back attitude here, then what are you doing? And so where does all this tension come from? It comes from the general state of the world, in my opinion. And getting back to Flaysim, like, one of the things that, I never really expected to be in the position I'm in. Everybody obviously starts posting videos thinking that, maybe someday people will watch them. And I certainly did that. But I think it's become much more of a thing now than it was when I started doing it. I see people with 1,000 or 1,500 subscribers, and they have a merch store. It's a thing now, and that's all well and good. But I think one of the things, and it could be true of other channels as well, it probably is, one of the things that I really like about my channel is and it could also be because it's part, mainly focused on being outside of the United States for one thing, or being, and being outside of like major, areas, right? And, Europe or whatever. And I feel very fortunate to have a very kind of international audience. And not only audience, but what I would call friends of the channel, people that I've gotten to know, people that have gotten to know each other through my channel, and it's remarkable. It's one of the things that truly amazes me. I've gotten to know people from Mauritius, which is an island in the Indian Ocean, all the way to all over, obviously from the Caribbean, from the United States, from all over the United States, from Canada, from Germany, from the UK, from South and Central America, from just all kinds of places, and it just including Russia, Eastern Russia, Vladivostok. I remember at one point. Asia, people from Australia. I remember flying in Australia. I did a stream in Australia probably a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and the controllers knew who I was. That totally blew my mind. And so I have this what I consider a great fortune to have a lot of connections in flight simulation. And I'll admit, so I just mentioned Vladivostok. There was somebody from Vladivostok, Russia, that was on my channel and visited a couple times during streams and whatnot. And I'll be perfectly open about this, and I don't want to get into politics, but this is the nature of what I'm talking about today. So my family is half Ukrainian. My grandfather on my Ukrainian side just passed away at 97, just over a year ago, and my wife and I got talking to him during COVID. We had a phone call one day, and it lasted like 3 hours, and we really enjoyed ourselves, and so we set up another phone call for a week later, and it turned into a regular thing that we would talk once a week, and we talked once a week for the last 4 or 5 years of his life. And he told us a lot about his family history and my family history, and the 1930s in the Ukraine, and what that time was like, and the connections that they had maintained with family in the Ukraine after they came to the US. And to put it mildly, I'm horrified and disgusted at what's going on in Ukraine right now. But I also have that luxury in a way as well. We don't get to pick, or we shouldn't pick the things that we're upset about on that scale, right? Like I shouldn't be any less upset about, the Congo, or, Guyana, or, Israel and Palestine. I shouldn't be any less upset about those things. And you just wonder what leads people, and I understand that it's in the majority of cases, people that are leading these countries that kind of where these things start, right? Or at least they have an outsized ability to shape what's going on and make a decision like, hey, I'm going to start, I'm going to invade the country next door. But there are so many people that pay the price and pay the ultimate price. And one of the other things that getting older has kind of, how do I want to say, my view has changed on human life. And that's, we're so used to like reading stories in the news, like, there was a house fire and somebody died. There was a stabbing in, Oklahoma and somebody died. And this is what we get in the news, right? There was a car accident and somebody died. There was a terrorist attack here. And there was a, plane crash here and so on and so forth. Or, there was a skirmish in northwest Pakistan and, 7 soldiers died. And those 7 soldiers were 7 human beings that had dreams and children and spouses and people that loved them, and were just like, and then we go on to the sports scores. And I, the older I get, the less I kind of understand that. And I, in for whatever reason, in whatever way, and for whatever pushed me in this direction, I just got to thinking about how bizarre is this that we are so casual with, the loss of human life. And those examples I gave you were small scale, but we have, large scale to the extent that we couldn't even really comprehend it in our minds, the number of deaths in these conflicts that I was talking about as well. And we do have to have like the ability to kind of detach, right, emotionally as well, because if we didn't, we'd just spend all of our time, crying because it would be so horrible. And the funny thing is like, there's so little conflict in what we do here in the sim. I will admit there have been times where I've been confronted with people from places that I'm not happy with right now. And one of the important things for me was to remember that, as I am kind of confronted with now as well, is like, we're not all representative or of the places we come from, and or the vice versa. Maybe the place that we come from is not quite representative of our values right now, and to remember that we're all individuals, and not to kind of get upset with people for maybe something that their government is doing that I don't really appreciate right now. And that is a great thing, because it moderates, my thoughts and my emotions on a subject that might upset me, And one of the other funny things that I'm very cognizant of in terms of this channel and the people that I'm fortunate enough to be around, and you might only watch one of my videos, you might only watch one of my streams and never come back. But I never forget the stories and the places that people are from. And setting up here for runway 13 approach into Culebra. I'm gonna go carb heat on here, especially because we're in a little bit of a haze, it seems like. But I think the medium of flight sim helping me, I can't speak for anybody else, but to view things in a little bit of a different way, in terms of where you're from, where I'm from, and perhaps what those two locations aren't quite, jiving right now, shall we say. And it doesn't always have to be, an armed conflict. It can also be a political conflict. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. I watched the Berlin Wall fall on television. I've always been what I consider to be politically conscious. My father was in politics his whole life. I used to get made fun of in school in 7th grade for reading the New York Times during lunch, but I've always had an outward view of the world, and having lived in Europe and learned another language, I speak German fluently, and that's another thing that's kind of brought connections with other members of the flight sim community. Having that perspective, I'm a very strong believer. I studied international politics in college. I'm a very strong believer of the the cross-Atlantic alliance, of the United States and Europe. And it's kind of bizarre watching the things that have underpinned our view of the world for my entire lifetime being, essentially discarded right now. And I understand, other people have different views of that, and that's where conflict arises, but there's so much going on in the world, and having the ability to, let me go mixture rich here, having the ability to get to know other people, and to interact with other people on a human level, all doing something we enjoy. I think we underestimate the value of that. I truly do. The value of connection and I'm gonna come back on the power here. We got the mixture rich carb heat is on. Come in, set a notch of flaps here in a second. I think that we both undervalue that, and I also think it's something that we could use to the benefit of all of us, because I think at the end of the day, what I'm ultimately trying to get at is we all could be doing better, and we all should be doing better. Like, if this is the best we have, this level of violent conflict and this level of, kind of interpersonal conflict, then I just think we've really missed the mark. I really think we've missed the mark if we can't do any better than we're doing right now. And I don't know if, I mean, to some extent, it's like shark bites, right? Like a couple years ago, 3 or 4 or 5 people got bitten by sharks around the world, and then all of a sudden, this summer, all you hear about in the news is shark bites. And plane crashes are the same thing, right? And so it could be, to an extent, that we're just hearing more about it. I don't think that's the case. I think I think there is more negative stuff going on in the world right now. But even more so, like, there's just no need, like, at this time, like, humankind is in a very good place in terms of science and health. And yes, are there things that we could be doing better in terms of, fighting diseases in places that shouldn't exist anymore, and education for girls and women that in some places aren't allowed to be educated. You know, there's all kinds of things we can point to and say, like, there's a shortfall of humanity. Like, there's plenty of shortfalls of humanity, but I think we're also doing, you know, pretty well on so many fronts that it makes me even more kind of surprised that we're still such barbarians on some levels, right? And it goes back to COVID as well. I mean, I think I wonder how much of an effect that sort of had on our world that we don't really understand yet, and may never understand. We bring some power in here, looking really good. This is such a fun approach. This is Culebra. Yeah, we got to bring some power. Getting a little slow, and I don't want to get any lower here right now anyway. Gosh, this looks amazing. This is a fun airplane. If you guys, I'll put a link in the description where you can get it. Alright, we gotta come in a little, keep that nose down and come in a little bit early because there's a left to right crosswind, but also not too bad here. Don't want to lose any speed and drop out of the air. That wasn't real good, was it? It's a little bit of a float. I think a little bit is the understatement of the century. I'm gonna do one more leg because I'm enjoying this this flight, and I'm enjoying this conversation. And it may turn out that I do one of these. You know, I kind of have an idea in my mind about keeping the carb heat flaps up, turn off the carb heat, of maybe where this can ultimately go. And it may turn out that nobody watches it, or everybody tells me to shut up and keep, you know, focused on DLSS4. But this is SLH Sim Designs. Great little airport, Culebra. You know, but you know, so there is a lot that we can still work on to improve humanity. But you know, I'm gonna come out here, Alpha 1, because there's a tree up at the end of the end of this taxiway that sometimes can clip a wing if you're not careful, and then you get stuck and you've got to restart your flight, and I really don't want to do that. So lights are on. Come out here on center line. There's nobody coming down final that I can see. Check the trim here. Trim is okay. Whoops, I knew that was going to happen. I was trying to get, I started auto FPS, but I think I had, oh, that's why. I know what the problem is. I didn't have the SimConnect file in my community folder, so auto FPS wouldn't connect because I had some issues with the feels good. Had some issues with my community folder and coming out of Sim Update 2 beta. So that's why performance is a little bit draggy right now, but we'll get back here. So we'll come around, and heading indicator checks with the runway number. Mixture is rich, carb heat is cold, flaps are good, takeoff power is coming in. Takeoff power is set. Engine instruments are in the green. Airspeed is alive. Right rudder, which is nice. 65 knots, and we'll just ease it off the ground. And this is another. So I was talking the other day about, yesterday actually, about some of my favorite departures in the sim. St. Bart's being kind of like the coolest one, you know. This is another great departure, if I don't manage to hit anything. Look at how wonderful the clouds look. And actually, there was, speaking of which, there was somebody on one of my streams who is moving here, who has a property here, and is going to retire here relatively soon. This is just a cool view. But like getting back to, for example, the more international, more diverse, broader group of people that tend to watch my channel and that I tend to interact with. I'll tell you a little something about kind of the behind the scenes of being a YouTube, content creator. It's not always nice. I'll give you a little secret here. It's not always nice. It's rare that it's unnice, but it happens. And I've had negative interactions with people at times. It generally comes as like comments. You get these bizarre comments on your videos, and tend to be disagreements on what, let's say for the 777, like I say it's really great, and they're like, oh, this is junk, you're an idiot, and okay, thanks, appreciate it. And I'll come back to that in a minute, because that's actually kind of one of the things that that kind of motivated me to talk about this today. But I would be foolish to think that even among the people who I get along with very nicely on this channel agree with me on even some of the things I've talked about today, and vice versa. Maybe I wouldn't agree with them on certain things. And so what is the reason why? I'm gonna stop at 2,500 feet here, because we're getting a little bit into the bottom of these clouds, and just nose it over, pull the power back until you hear the engine sound decrease, and then just level it off, and you're probably going to be right at your the RPM setting you're looking for. So how is it that even people who probably, there's almost no question that there are people that I interact with regularly who, if we were to start talking about, I'm going to turn the carpy on as well so we don't get carb ice, that if we got talking about things other than flight sim and airplanes and these types of things, that we would disagree with one another. So how is it that we don't? It's because we all love flying, ultimately, right? We all love flight simulation. And I've come to realize that flight simulation, yes, it is simulating flying airplanes. That by definition, right? That's what it is. But flight simulation is on its own a different thing than flying. And I've come to realize that too. You can be interested in one and not the other, strangely enough. But it is this thing of flight simulation that bridges gaps, that bridges what might otherwise be disagreements, what might otherwise be people that don't or that aren't inclined to begin with one another. One of the amazing things about Anguilla, which is kind of like the starting off point, I guess you could say, the starting point for my channel, the whole philosophy of Island Sim Pilot, right? Anguilla is an amazing place. I've spent enough time there, and I know enough people there, and I'm really happy to kind of be beyond what I would consider the superficial. Like, you can go there and, you know, spend your time, you know, in a resort with, you know, chilled towels and somebody bringing you, you know, Mai Tai or whatever, you know, while you sit there and have a good time. And you can go home and be like, oh, Anguilla is the most amazing place in the world. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard not to be amazing when you're sitting in, you know, a $2,000 a night hotel room on the beach and having people service you all the time. So my wife and I got married in Anguilla in August, excuse me, of last year. And we got married in a very small church that we've been going to since 2013, since we started going to Anguilla, with a wonderful pastor who's just an incredible human being. And to put it very simply, mine is the only white face in that church, right? And that's not an experience that I'm necessarily used to. And the beauty of Anguilla, and I'm sure that there are, I'm sure that I'm naive on some level. I have no question about that. But the welcome that you feel, I've never felt an outsider. I've never felt, you know, unwelcome by, you know, by any stretch. Even though I know that a lot of the people on Anguilla and a lot of people in the Caribbean, I've been reading Caribbean history for the last year and a half, and it's a crazy history, you know. And I know that people that look like me haven't always been quite kind, and, you know, to people that, you know, to the locals in the islands and their ancestors, right? I remember sitting in a cafe in, I'll never forget this. I remember sitting in a cafe in St. Martin in 2021. It was our first trip after COVID, first trip during COVID, really. And we were sitting in a cafe having breakfast, and there was a table of Americans sitting nearby, retired, you know, and they're probably in their 70s. And there was a guy wearing a t-shirt that said "Black Labs Matter," like the dog. And it had the picture of a black lab and the dog. And I seriously wanted to take my coffee cup and break it over the guy's head. Like, how can you be so insensitive? You know, you are on an island with, you know, where, without any question, the overwhelming majority of the population are descendants of slaves. And this is how you're going to treat them. You can't even be thoughtful or humble while you're on vacation for a week. You can't leave your stupid politics and just your inconsideration of other human beings at the door for 7 days and have some respect for other people. And, you know, anyway, I just, the thing that's so amazing about Anguilla, and I again, I understand I am naive in some level. I know that it's not as easy for some people, even though they're smiling. That the sense that I've always gotten from Anguilla, I've been to a lot of tourist places, right? You know, touristy locations. I've lived in touristy areas where people are, you know, everybody smiles at you. Everybody's kind. Everybody's consider it, because they know you're a tourist and they know that their bread is literally buttered by you visiting wherever they happen to live. I don't get that sense from Anguilla, and I never have. Meaning that I feel like there's a genuine kindness and a genuine consideration there. And I've always said, like, you can meet, and I have met people in Anguilla from the U.S. You always run into other tourists at, we stay at a place called Caramar. You always meet other people on the beach. You meet other people at restaurants. You meet, and where are you from, and what do how many times have you been here, et cetera, et cetera. And it's interesting because, and I've always joked, like, if you could get a Bernie Sanders supporter and a Donald Trump supporter together on Anguilla, and they'd be buying each other drinks. So why isn't the world like that elsewhere? Why do we have to be in a place that is arguably paradise? Why can't we disagree agreeably? Why can't we disagree constructively? And that's not only in interpersonal relationships, but it's also in, like, okay, you think this other country shouldn't be doing that, or they think you shouldn't be doing that, so okay, so we're going to start launching rockets at each other. I mean, come on, guys. There's got to be a better way in 2025. And we talk about there's St. Thomas right there, and I think the little kind of misty clouds are the things that that give this kind of stutter, or like, make things unsmooth. It's been the case in Flight in 2020 as well. And we're gonna go past St. Thomas. I'm gonna go to Beef Island. We'll land over Beef Island, and we'll call it a day. And I'll stop my rant. But you talk about people who are people who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. There are 2 world wars that started in Central Europe. Not a whole heck of a lot, far away from where, the conflict in Ukraine is happening right now. And, you kind of expect that at some point something will change and that will come to an end. But how many more people have to die before that happens? And for what? For what? What is going to be is the outcome going to be worth the loss of life and the trauma? I mean, people. It's not even just the actual loss of life. Kids growing up, little kids, babies. Growing up, and what they're used to hearing is explosions and having to go into bomb shelters, and and also the soldiers who have to go through this, and it's just crazy to me that today we don't have a better way of doing this. And so what's the answer? I mean, so in addition to kind of the interpersonal connections that we get through flight simulation, I've talked about plenty of times on the channel, like the fact that I get to see places, quote unquote, in the sim that I'll never see in real life. Likely anyway, right? Like, I mean, it's unlikely that it's unlikely that I'll get to the Maldives. It's unlikely that I'll get to Australia. It's unlikely that I'll fly through Southeast Asia. It's unlikely that I'll, it's unlikely that I'll get to a lot of the places in South America that I've flown to. It's unlikely that I'll get to all the places in the Caribbean that I've flown to, which is all of them, you know. So beyond even the connections that you make with other people interacting on streams and interacting with videos, when you go to different places, you see different places. I anyway am inclined to like kind of look them up and look a little bit about them and find about, you know, what's going on there and what their history is. I'm always fascinated by like flying over places like this and looking down and you see the houses and you think, what are the lives of these people like right now? You know, what are these folks doing? What are their, you know, hopes? What are their dreams? What are their challenges? And, you know, so there's that connection. And so kind of tying up or maybe taking a step back from the philosophical, what can we do? You know, I think one of the things that we can do is take a lesson from, you know, the understanding that we are all largely the same. We have largely the same goals. We have largely the same values and interests. You know, respect for. I think most people at their core are good. I don't think very many people anyway on the planet are born and they're like, okay, well, let me go ruin somebody's life. You know, you know, how can I make your life a living, you know, hell? Or what can I do to benefit me over everybody else around me? I don't think there's a lot of people like that in the world. There are, but I don't think that's the, you know, the majority of people by any stretch. And so what do we do? I think that what do we do and in what ways can Flight Sim contribute? So I think that getting to know other people and not focusing on things that we you know, actually let me flip that around. Getting to know other people in the context of doing something that we all enjoy, which by its nature doesn't allow us to disagree, right? If you think, you know, if you're on one side of an issue and I'm on another side of an issue, the likelihood of those things coming up in flight simulation are pretty slim. You know, I'm talking issues outside of, you know, whether the PMDG 777 is the greatest airplane in history or not, you know, or whether this scenery developer is any good, or whether that, you know, this change that Asobo made is helpful or not. You know, the likelihood that any of us are going to really come into, you know, verbal conflict over whatever it might be is pretty low, because we're all talking about flight simulation. That's fantastic, and I think that's the starting point or the launching pad for perhaps toning down what's happening in the world. And I do believe that we on our own level can make a difference. I got into a conflict with AvSim. I made a video about it. In some ways I regret doing it, and in some ways I don't, because the reason that I was mostly upset with that situation wasn't the way I was treated. I'm a big boy. You know, I'll get over it. That's the Beach Bar right there, by the way. Check out the Beach Bar webcam on YouTube. There's a great view that you can watch there. But the thing that upset me about the whole thing, in some ways I'm glad it was me that was treated that way, because I had a platform to kind of address it. I don't know that I addressed it in the right way, But what bothered me isn't what happened to me. It was the fact that it could happen to somebody else. And there's just no reason for strife and, you know, argument and, you know, just treating other people rudely and inconsideration is a pretty big understatement. And the reason I made that video is because I'm sure I'm not the only person it's happened to. And my hope was that maybe by publicizing it and making it a public or making it a public, you know, issue, that maybe some of the people that were behaving in the way they were behaving towards others on AvSim might change, or the moderation staff might decide, you know what, we can't have certain members treating other people this way, you know. And so on our own personal level, we can be a little nicer, you know, because conflict begets conflict. When you react to somebody in a nasty way, or I mean, I see it all the time on the official forums, people making just unnecessary comments. Not unnecessary in the content. You know, they may have a strong opinion on something, may have a strong feeling about something, you know, flight sim related. But you don't have to demean somebody else. You know, you don't have to you know, put somebody else down to get your point across. You know, ironically, here I am talking about peace, love, and happiness. I got thrown out of the official forums too. So maybe I'm the problem. I don't know. It's you know, maybe it's me. But the disagreement I got into there, again, with the, you know, the staff essentially that runs the website, the official forums, was because of this. It was because of the way that people were getting away with treating other people. And I just thought it was nonsense that you've got these policies that say, you know, you can't insult others, you can't, you know, demean others, you can't, you know, speak in certain ways, and it happens all the time. And that's what upset me, was that nothing is done about it. So we get to know other people that we wouldn't get to know otherwise. We get to interact with people that are different from us, but on a level of enjoying something that we all enjoy. And I think that, I think, like I said at the beginning, I think we underestimate the importance of these things and the value that it could have in the greater world. And I'm not a hippie. I'm not, you know, I'm not, you know, you know, I mean, I guess I shouldn't put a negative connotation on it. I just think that we could all do better towards one another, and that can make a difference in the grander scheme of life, you know. And it's about it starts with kind of thinking about it. And I have a lot more time on my hands than I did round about 5 months ago, and I'm considering doing a video on that as well at some point, because I made I know I'm not divorced, but I made some really big changes in my life over the last couple of months that have given me a lot more time from not spending time doing things that I used to do that took more than they gave. And and also watching the impact that certain things have had, that people I love are doing, and you know, really having negative impacts on themselves. And so, you know, it starts with just kind of thinking about what we do and how we do it and why we do it, and you know, keeping what's good and hopefully accentuating what's good and lifting what's good higher and making what's good a bigger priority, and at the same time taking away those things that aren't good for us, that aren't good for the people around us and the people that we interact with. I had a great uncle, and my father told me this story since I was a kid. I had a great uncle who used to say, "It's nice to be nice." And I think there's so much value in, you know, kind of folksy wisdom like that, that we don't give it enough credit. And to kind of wrap up what I've been talking about, I think that's not what I meant to do. Rule number, let me get back to flying for a second. I just put in a notch of flaps. What I meant to do was turn on the carb heat. Never press a button or flip a switch or push a lever, anything like that, in an airplane without looking at it and verifying that you are pushing the button that you think you're pushing or pulling the lever you think you're pulling. Don't ever do that. And I just did it. Can Flight Sim save the world? Probably not. Probably not. Can Flight Sim make the world a better place? Yes. Yes, I think it absolutely can. And I think we underestimate the importance of it, and the kind of the potential for you know, for what it can do for all of us, you know. And you know, getting back to having lived, you know, overseas and lived in different countries and lived in different places and having these experiences of being in other places, again, I very rarely have come away from those experiences thinking, wow, those people are so much different than I am. You know, very rarely, if ever. And so I would encourage all of us to kind of maybe think a little bigger on the one hand, and on the other hand also think a little smaller in terms of, like, you know, what is the value of the interaction that you're having with somebody, or what's the cost of saying something that you don't need to say, or saying something in a way that you don't need to say it. And how can we, you know, on an individual level, just be a little bit better, you know? And that's what I would love to see. That's what I would really love to see. And I have as much room to grow as anybody else, you know. But I was talking to a friend of mine last night. We have a very dear friend of ours staying with us right now because his went through a divorce and is one of the most generous and thoughtful and kind human beings I know. And anyway, we were talking about being open to change and to growth, and to not, you know, doing things the way we've always done them. And it's hard to do as you get older. You get more set in your ways. You know, but we can all make a little bit of an effort, a little bit more of an effort. And I think if we do the sum total of what we all do could be very important. So we've got no flaps, so let's get in a notch of flaps. In the white arc, let's go second notch of flaps. The nose pitch up is pretty strong here in this airplane. This is a great view. I love this airport. So 65 knots makes me quite happy. Expecting to catch some ridge lift here, and then probably a nice drop. And we got to counter that drop with power because I don't have any airspeed to pitch the nose down, or to pull the nose up rather. So now we'll bring that power back again here a little bit. So now, because I'm on the speed that I want to be on, I have to manage my vertical position with power. We're quite high, but I mean, this is the 150, 152. And I would rather be too high than, certainly rather be too high than too low. So I'm going to let it come down here a little bit. Don't want to get too crazy. 1,000 foot per minute descent rate is not what I'm looking for. See, now we're getting draggy. Alright. Not worried about it because it's a very such a simple, it's one of the things I love about this plane is it's such a simple airplane. Alright, feeling really good. Let's see if we can settle this one in. A little bit right to left there. Alright. Power's out. Pitch is a little bit sensitive, but... Oh, that was... Including, in addition to improving as human beings, we can also improve as pilots, right? I'll lean the mixture out, and I forgot to load this airport clearly because this is a great airport. SLH Sim Designs makes a really beautiful version of this airport that I forgot to load. Although I'm kind of surprised that I forgot to load it, but I clearly did. So like I said, this is just some things that I've had on the back of my mind for a while. And again, I may release this video and you guys might say, you know what, stick to performance tips, buddy. And that's fine too. But I just think that we underestimate the value or the potential value for making the world a better place, making the world a more enjoyable place, making life better, you know, for people through this medium that we all enjoy. You know, and if Flight Sim can, you know, make us all get along better, then why not pay more attention to that and try to, you know, eke out a little more. So So we'll go toes on the brakes, mixtures to idle, cutoff throttle is idle. Set the parking brake, flaps are up, we'll turn the lights off. There is no avionics master. Well, I guess the transponder is on, must be set to the, no, it's not. Alright, transponder is off, lights are off. Avionics master and battery switches are off, and what I should have done when I landed was open that window, because these planes are like they're like greenhouses. It's so hot in these planes. The custom tail number clearly doesn't work, even though this is a stock livery. But anyway, I appreciate you guys listening. I'm very interested to see what people think, and I hope everybody's doing well, and we will talk soon. Take care.